Hi there, I'm Kathleen Jasper, and I've been getting asked questions about people pursuing becoming an adjunct professor at their local university. So I thought I would share my experience with you today on that. Let's get started. Back in 2015, I had the opportunity to be an adjunct professor, and I was so excited about it. I was in my doctoral program for educational leadership, and a couple of my professors mentioned to me that they needed adjunct professors in the Department of Education and asked if I would be interested. They also knew I was unemployed because I had quit my job in public education at that point. So they knew I probably could use, an extra job or two. So I was really excited to become an adjunct. I have always dreamt of teaching at the college level, and I really wanted to do it. So of course I looked into it, said yes, and became an adjunct at the university where I live. And it was awesome. There were so many things I loved about it, and there were some things that weren't so great. So I thought I would share with you the pros and the cons. First thing you should know about becoming an adjunct professor is that the pay is abysmal. If you think public education teachers in K-12 schools is low, being an adjunct is even worse. I think I was paid maybe $2,500 per semester per class. So it came out to, I taught 2 classes, so it came out to $5,000 per semester. That's $10,000 a year. And even if I added more classes to that, it still wouldn't have been enough for me to live on. So becoming an adjunct is great if you're trying to supplement your income a little bit, if you want to try something new, but it's definitely not something that you would be able to just have a full-time career at. Now, becoming an adjunct could lead to, a full-time professorship where you are actually, a tenured professor and paid, but those positions are really hard to get because those professors have been there forever. They're not giving up those jobs. And so it's hard to kind of squeeze in there. And most university systems hire adjuncts now because they can get them at a cheap price and they don't really have to train them. And it's kind of a thing. Now, every university is different. But most universities use adjuncts as, filler, and they hire a lot of them at a very low rate. So if you're looking for some extra money to add to your income that you already have, adjuncting is great. If you're looking for a career change, being an adjunct alone with nothing else is not going to make it. You just won't be able to make enough money. So one of the cons is the pay, and you just have to understand that as you get into it. Now, another pro or con, it just depends on the kind of person you are, is that in my experience, there was zero structure in what I was going to be teaching. So they gave me 2 courses, Intro to Teaching and Diversity in Education. And these were intro level courses. That means that students took these courses before they declared their major in education. So they were just trying to figure out if they wanted to become teachers. These are freshman courses. This is when they're just kind of picking courses to see, what they're going to major in. And there was zero guidance on it. I basically was given, a schedule. Here is the room number. Here is when the course is, and that is it. No syllabus, no evaluation, no new teacher training, nothing. Now, I didn't mind that because that meant I got to build the course the way I wanted to, and I got to use the materials I wanted. There might have been a textbook recommended. I can't remember, but I know there was not a textbook for both courses. I had to kind of come up with what they were going to use for the textbook. And I didn't really have textbooks for that class. I didn't want them to spend all that money. I was using other supplementary material at the time. So no structure whatsoever. They just kind of threw me in there and said, here are the keys to the classroom, and this is when you need to be there. And again, I thrived in that situation because I like to create things on my own, but I do know a lot of teachers who like structure and like an outline and like to be told, exactly what they need to be doing. Some people operate better in that atmosphere. If that's the way you operate, being an adjunct is probably not the best thing. But on the flip side, on the good side of the coin, I would say, is that nobody ever came in to check on me to see what I was doing. There were no evaluations except for the students. I had student evaluations, but no principal or university president or department chair came in to observe me at any time. Now, I'm not saying that's the way it's done at all schools, and I'm not even saying that's done with everybody at a certain school. That was just my experience, and it was fine because I was able to develop the course the way I wanted. So building on that, the next thing I was able to do was kind of develop a course that I thought would be very impactful for students. And so for my intro to education course, I had two ways in which I was approaching it. Number one, education policy, because I really wanted to teach students about the policy that governs the profession, because I feel like most people don't understand that part before they get into teaching. And then they get into teaching and they see all the bureaucratic stuff, the governors telling you what to do, the state, the district, things like that. And so I really wanted to analyze public policy and how it affected, teachers and students. And so we did a lot at school board meetings. We didn't actually have a textbook at the time, so we attended school board meetings. We looked up policy, old and new, court cases, things like that. And that was one piece of the pie. The next piece was that we focused on standards, because a lot of them don't get that kind of education in the Department of Education when they go into their majors. They get a lot of teaching theory. And again, I'm talking from my own experience, teaching theory and not, this is a standard. This is how you read a standard. This is how you use a standard. These are objectives, kind of that basic framework for becoming a teacher. So I had that piece as well. And then the third piece of the pie was that we took lessons and tried to teach them in an authentic way to really help students engage. And so they kind of got to develop lessons that they would want to learn from. And that was really fun too. So we had the policy piece, the standards piece, and then the actual teaching piece and how to make it engaging for students. Then in my diversity of education class, that was kind of one that we could explore all kinds of things. We studied a lot on culture, different movements, and how that impacts education, power in the classroom, because teachers have a lot of power, and how do we navigate that? I was doing a lot of work in that area for my doctoral program, so I was helping them explore those avenues, which led to tons of discussion and personal experience, and it was really an amazing course, and I loved every minute of it. But again, I was kind of able to just develop this course the way I wanted, and it was great. Then at the end, we would do some papers. I did have grades along the way. We did papers, research papers, things like that. But I didn't really have to focus a lot on grades because it was an intro class. And I was able to kind of focus more on the learning and the teaching rather than the grades, which was an awesome experience for me as a former high school K-12 teacher in public schools. I certainly graded the students, but it wasn't based on a standardized test score. It wasn't based on these, very rigid guidelines that I had in K-12 education. So for me, that was awesome. I was able to give them a lot of feedback on their writing. If they revised their writing and did what I asked, I would give them the good grade. It was just kind of this give and take of me teaching them how to write research in these areas, them revising, me giving them feedback, them revising. And then they could do that as many times as they wanted, and they would get the grade that they wanted once they did all the revisions I asked for. I didn't just give out A's. They had to work for it, but I allowed them to resubmit over and over so that they could learn the skill rather than just have this, cutoff of you either passed or you didn't. I loved that part of the job. And then finally, at the end, they evaluated me. And there's also a website, rateyourprofessors.com. I've seen a couple of my evaluations there. The students really liked it. They said they learned a lot. It was great. That was the extent of my evaluations. If I was going to continue as an adjunct, I certainly would have wanted more feedback from the department and things like that. But at the time, I was only there for one full year. So I was okay with just the student evaluations and just kind of having fun in the process. So I did it for a full year. And after that year, my business started to take off. And so I got out of it because it wasn't really worth the money at the time. And I really wanted to develop the business that I have now. However, I loved the experience. My students were 18, 19-year-old kids. And those are students who I'm used to teaching because I was a high school teacher. They weren't always that enthusiastic because it was an intro class. They weren't yet into their major, but dealing with apathetic teenagers is my jam. That's the type of student that I always had, apathetic teenagers. And so I was able to use my skills as a high school teacher and implement that in the adjunct role. And even jazz it up a little bit more where I didn't have that freedom before in K-12 education. So if you're thinking about doing it, I totally recommend exploring this option. Also, if you have a master's degree or higher, you can become an adjunct at most universities or colleges in your area. So see if they're hiring adjuncts if you want to try something new and maybe supplement your income, or if it's a way to get into the university that you eventually want to teach in. It just depends on the structure and how they run that. But I definitely recommend it. But you should absolutely understand that the pay is terrible. There is absolutely no structure, and you're kind of going to be out there in no man's land on your own developing these courses. That was my experience. Some schools might have more structure. They might really nurture their adjuncts. But from what I read and from my friends who still adjunct, it still seems to be that that's the situation. You're kind of thrown in there, given the keys to the classroom and said, we'll see you at the end of the semester, so to speak. But it's worth it to me. If you want to try it, give it a go. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. Have a great day.